Having long-term care conversations with loved ones is very essential. The earliest we start them, the better. And today, that's what we're going to chop it up about. Hi, I'm Dr. Preston Cherry, founder and CEO of Concurrent Financial Planning, where we let your life lead your money, not your money lead your life. Have you ever thought that having long-term conversations would start in your 40s or 50s, not only for yourself, but for your loved ones as well? And when we have these conversations early and often, it helps us better get prepared about what type of support and services we're going to provide for ourselves and our loved ones. And some generations, like the Generation X, are sandwiched in between to where they have to take care of both. And today we have a special guest who is a former caregiver. She's a CFP and the founder of Sparks Financial and a Twitter friend. And I'm glad to have her here, Danielle Miura. Danielle, thank you for being on the show.
Yeah, as a long-term listener, I really appreciate the opportunity to be part of your podcast journey. So thank you for having me on.
Sure. Yes. So I'm a fan of yours. I'm a big fan of long-term care. I researched a paper, an academic paper about long-term care support and services. And there's a few folks out there that are really paying attention to this dynamic, and it's really real. And then it's one thing, and also practice it with clients, but it's one thing to do it academic and also practice with clients. It's another to have a story like yours and also how you serve people with your services. And you had a dynamic story that I came across, and it's fabulous the way you deliver it with passion and connection, because that's where it starts. And then you back it up with, advice and education about it. You're often quoted on a lot of magazines. So Danielle, let's unpack your story for those that are not familiar.
Thank you so much. I feel like I got a great opening for sharing my story. So if I were to crumble my long story into a brief experience, I would say that when I was 25, I moved home, as a lot of people did during COVID. My husband was working virtually, so it wasn't a requirement to be in office. So we decided to move closer to home in hopes that I would be able to take advantage of babysitting and being closer to family. And about a month after we moved into our home, my grandmother fell on tile floor. I was 25 at the time, and the tile floor must have not liked me that day, because that was the first day I became a family caregiver. So I was taking care of an aging adult as well as a young child.
Wow, that's such a young age as well. First of all, I mean, what was not without getting too personal, but what was the emotional impact? And because it was so sudden, what was the emotional impact, and also like the preparation of not only your life changing course, but also perhaps the financials behind it? Can we unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, so if I'm tackling the emotional side, I would say that I wasn't prepared emotionally. I'm a people pleaser. I'll do anything for my family. I'm an only child, so that probably doesn't make it any easier. I will be there for my family as quick as I can. And so I didn't have a lot of experience with building self-care practices or placing boundaries. A lot of people think that's just something that is just easy to come by, that just comes naturally to people. But I believe that it's a skill that is built over time. And at 25, I had not built enough of those practices to be able to perform caregiving well.
Yes, yes. Excuse my manners. My mother just visited me and she slapped me upside the head for not saying or as acknowledging what you went through. Number one, and your loved ones. That's it can be traumatic, but yeah, sorry for what you went through because it was all of a sudden. How now pivoting towards the event happened, unfortunately, you felt like you weren't prepared. You have a value system to care for your family. What are some of the things that you talk about so often on your Twitter feed and your newsletter and the like? What are some of the things that you would have liked to be better prepared for and have a financially and have a process to deal or work through emotionally?
Yeah, there's so many things. Financially, we were very lucky that we planned for family caregiving. My husband and I are both only children, so we expected the day to come eventually. We just didn't think it was going to come as early as we thought it was. And being having financial education background, we saved as much as we could to prepare for that day. Of course, just like you said about having conversations about long-term care, now is the time. It's not, you never know when long-term care is needed. And we were hoping maybe 10 years from now, we could kind of hope that it wouldn't happen. I think a lot of financial advisors think, oh, long-term care is not going to happen so early. Like, why should we have these conversations at 40? It's unlikely to happen. Well, what about caregiving? What about the people who become disabled before they turn 60? It happens. Shit happens, as my father
Yeah,
would say.
yeah, for sure. For sure. Uncertainty in life is certain. And so is death. We're all going to have to deal with it. And I don't say that lightly. However, there's only a certain amount of areas to where you're guaranteed you're going to have to, plan for. And it's death. But folks do not want to have to talk about the end of their lives nor their loved ones. But it is a guarantee. And especially needing long term care support and services at the end of life, it's hard to predict, but it's quite frequent that you're going to need some. So you said that you and your husband talked about it early. How critical is that, Danielle?
So critical. I feel like I'm like the walking tale of what it's like to experience things early. I like the person who defines every myth that exists because I
Hmm.
am walking proof that these things exist.
Hmm. For
And
sure.
in a way, I feel like that's beautiful. In a way, it's also challenging as well. Many people perceive a family caregiver to be like an older woman, maybe in her 50s, caring for their parents. And that was not the case for me.
Mm. Yes, to your point, there's a lot of maybe assumptions or stereotypes of what caregiving is and what time of life it happens. Like it's just planned. Like you mentioned, it's like, oh, okay, where we, the caregivers, are elderly at some point, just like our the people that we're trying to take care of, and it's just it follows a rhythm, and oftentimes it simply does not. And that goes back to the conversational piece and then taking action on how and who is going to pay for the caregiving, who's going to administer the caregiving. Let's talk about that. It's quite essential. You know, the caregiving itself can be I don't want to say the B word, but lack of a better term right now, a burden or, a lean on someone's time and emotion. How does that conversation go, or how does the loved one express of how they want to be cared for? So let's talk about that.
Yeah, so there's a lot of variables. I think it's a responsibility of both the family member as well as the person who will need care to have these conversations. Do I feel that caregiving and long term care is just one person's job? No. I've been having these conversations with my grandmother since I was very young. We talked about death and dying probably in my teenager years. It was just something that she brought up inheritance a lot. She brought up what to do when she's died, like dying, when she's dead, what her funeral will be like. Probably about a week before she passed away, we were still talking about it. So it was seeds that were planted gradually over years. It wasn't just one day, one time. that all these wishes occurred. And I think that if I wouldn't have had those conversations, I would have been so unprepared for what she wanted because I didn't know what, how are you supposed to know right off the bat? You make tons of decisions as a family caregiver. You're just like Dr. Cherry, you brought a baby home. You're deciding how you're going. Most people have experienced having a child, but not necessarily experienced long-term care. So if we were to break it down into having a child, we're thinking about how do we want to deliver that child? Is that home or in hospital? Is that hospital going to have a NICU in case you need it? When you get home, are you going to breastfeed or formula feed? You have all these decisions to make. What is recovery going to be like? All these decisions that need to be made, usually within the first month or so of the baby's life. And so that's the same thing for when, let's say you have a surgery, a simple knee surgery. You're going to be out of the hospital probably same day. You're going to need someone to bring you home from the hospital after surgery. So that requires a support team probably to take you home. You're probably going to need some type of meal chain or somebody to bring you meals because you're not going to right away be able to just cook some meals up for yourself, especially if you're alone. You're going to need to set up physical therapy or maybe a rehab to get you up on your feet. So it's not just like, let's put this all in one chain and it's going to be a chain reaction and all these decisions are just going to be made just right off the bat. It's going to take some time to make these decisions with someone else's part. And if they don't know what your wish is, you're just going to be stuck somewhere you don't want to be. Maybe you'd rather be home and have physical therapy brought to your home. But let's say your child decides to just put you in a rehab.
Mm. Yeah.
How are they going to know?
That you're not going to know without the conversation. Without the conversation, you're not going to know. And then, wow, Danielle, you said so much there because some of the conversation number one, what type of services that the caregiver is going to provide and that your family member wants. And then that also determines how you, the family, is going to pay for those services because it's like what type depends on how much is the family going to contribute, not only through care and time, but also finances. Are we going to share this cost? Is it going to come from the family member only? Much to unpack there. But let's start with one of the topics that you mentioned, which is the wishes of the family member. The wishes of the family member. That's dignity. Get control over how they want to be cared for. Do you think that made your grandmother comfortable knowing that her care wishes were going to be carried out the way she wanted them?
I don't think at the end of the day, a caregiver is going to make perfect decisions for everything. We made so many decisions. Sometimes wishes get thrown out the window and you just make the best decision possible. I do feel that she felt comfortable knowing that her main wishes were heard. She wanted to age in place. She wanted to be with her dog. She wanted to provide home care, even though it was super expensive. It was 24-hour care. So it was over $120,000 per month. Per year, sorry. A little bit of a difference, but it was super expensive for her 24-hour home care. Luckily, she prepared in advance with long-term care insurance. But we made sure that the focus was there. That no matter what we did, what decisions we made, that our main focus was in home care with her dog, being able to be comfortable in her home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing, by the way. It's fantastic that you mentioned that you got to give yourself some grace during this process as far as the caregiver. Because, like you said, not everything is going to go perfectly well. So that's going to help the emotional aspect of, transitioning through, going through and transitioning through that period is a little bit of grace and knowing that everything is not going to be perfect, but also with the comfort from the conversation previously that you're better prepared for them. You mentioned different levels of care. This is very important because folks, value. When I say folks, I mean the family members themselves, even the person that's giving the care. That's why the conversation has to be a collaboration and not just one way. A loved one may want to have family take care of them 24/7, but family doesn't have that time. They have careers and families themselves. So let's talk about the different types of care, whether it be, a facility, or a nurse practitioner that stops by sometimes, in-house, or even, shared amongst these professionals and family members. And then the cost of them. I mean, because like you said, that sticker shock is astounding to some folks. So what are some of the most common service, I guess, methods for long-term care with
So,
family members?
yeah, if we were to go from most expensive to maybe least expensive, obviously in-home care, especially 24-hour care, is the most expensive care that you'll receive. The second one would probably be continuing care retirement communities, depending on how much you're paying into them. Just to give you a little bit of background, it just gradually increases care as you need it. And then depending on location, either nursing homes or assisted living communities would be next. Usually nursing homes are a little bit more expensive just because of the care required. And then you have assisted living communities. And then if you're a little bit creative, you might have where you have multiple cares at once, which usually people don't talk about. So you may have adult daycare during the day and then have a family member take care of you during the nighttime. You may have just like care for a child. There's always going to be different ways to get creative with care. You may have a family member take care of you 24/7. So it really depends. You can sort of shape what kind of care you want as long as you have a backup plan in place. For
Mm.
example, let's say you're like my grandmother who's dying of issues to live and die in her home. Sure, that's fine. But what if you need more care than what in-home care can provide? Then what do you do? So that's why I think it's important. Many people are like, I just want to die in my home. I love my home. I've been here for ages. Yeah, that's fine. But what if it comes a time where you can't physically live in this house anymore? It's not equipped for you. You need more care than what's currently can be provided. What's your plan B in place? Because that family member or whoever friend who's going to be there to support you is probably going to put you in a community, into a facility, because they don't know what else to do. And it's most likely because you haven't educated them on which community you want to live in. It might be the community that everybody hates in town, but they just don't live it. So they don't know. It might be like the one community everybody in town hates or dislikes, or there's something about it that's maybe it stinks in there because it's just so old. But they're just going to go based off of ratings, online ratings, or just go based off of what's perceived and just put you in what they think is best. But you may totally dislike this facility.
Right. You make a great point. I encourage clients to go by and take themselves and their family members to the facilities, to where they want to perhaps want to live in, to test them out, to stop by, meet folks, talk to community members that are inside the facilities, and get that hands-on experience about where they could potentially be living, so they can actually get a feel for it before it happens, and not just rely on the reviews and the stories of the community and such. What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's part of every client's long-term care plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tour,
I mean, yeah.
assisted living communities within your town. That will give you an idea of what you're looking for, what you're not looking for, who can support you, worst case scenario, if in-home care doesn't work. And you also usually get a free meal as well. Usually they'll provide free lunch depending on the community. So it's not like you're totally like not getting anything out of the tour.
Right, right. Here's another thing about pre-planning all of this, and we'll come back to cost here in a minute. But there's family dynamics. My family, we're having multi-generational approach, but right now it's not to my level quite yet, but it is between my father, his brother, and sister, and far as care for my grandmother. And there's a lot of conversations about who's going to do what, or how long, the location, the emotional strain, all this. So what about that family dynamic? Because that can get tough. That can get tough about you know who at life stages, who's giving how much care. It can sometimes cause a contribute to contention. So my thought process about that is the earlier you start, then you won't be well. There's always going to be room for adjustment, but it reduces the friction of being in the moment, making those decisions and living those. Let's talk about that family dynamic of who's doing what, how much, and what time, and all of that.
Yeah, as long-term care gets more expensive, I definitely see an increase of multi-generational households, specifically because the cost and also culture as well. There's many cultures who are like, I'll never put my parents in a assisted living community. They need to be right here with me. And culturally, that is what I will provide to my parents. I am their retirement plan. I am their long-term care plan. And I will do whatever I can to give back to them. Just like my grandmother, she was the one who my grandparents used to pick me up from school. My grandparents gave me advice when I first gave birth to my daughter. I always remember I was sitting in the hospital bed right after giving delivery, and I was asking her advice about how to take care of my child. She poured into my cup, and I wanted to pour back into hers because she was like my second parents to me. And I feel that a lot of people feel the same. They want to give back as much as possible, but there's also a limit to giving back. What is that boundary? What is that financial, emotional boundary to care? And
Hmm.
what are you willing to risk and take on to care for family? And
Yeah.
it's really hard when they're all in your house. It's not like you can just avoid them.
For sure, for sure. You mentioned something that was fantastic, which was culture. Folks are not used to having a community culture versus a individualistic culture or independent culture. Then it could be very strained in order to transfer in between the two. Because number one, it's a value system. It's a core belief. Some cultures say that no, we believe in a community system to where we're going to take care of our elderly, and that's just how it's been and how it's going to go going forward. And that may not be the best on the outside looking in, but they're well practiced in it because it's part of their culture. And then you go to shift to a more independent culture, maybe in the Western part of the world, to where if they tried that out, hopefully it would work, but it may be a dynamite cup as well. So culture is essential to having these conversations about care because how have we done it? We meaning family, and how are we going to do it going forward? Because not only is it going to affect the emotional conversation dialogue, it's going to affect who's giving the care, and then ultimately the cost. Do you think that I've been reading some articles, that a more community approach, if it's considered, may perhaps be better, lack of a better term, than an individualistic approach? Just hypothetical. Just what are some of your thoughts behind this conversation of the community approach, taking care of elders, meaning the family, and then maybe the individual depending on themselves and relying on themselves and less family.
Yeah, Dr. Maggie Orstein does a lot of work around caregiving ecosystems. Just to give you some research, if you want to look into it. But just to go back to the first phrase that you mentioned, the hardest part about talking about long-term care, specifically with clients from a financial planning perspective, is that everybody has their own perspectives of what long-term care and caregiving look like. who am I to judge what that looks like? Having empathy and an open mind is key to these types of conversations. It's like telling a caregiver, put on your mask, your oxygen mask before others. Sure, I'll put on my mask before others. It may not stay on very long, maybe a couple seconds, because I know I'll have to go back to the hospital, or I know I'll have to go run, I'll go have to make an order on Amazon. I know it may not stay very long. But did anybody ask me why I can't put that mask on for very long? Why I can't take care of myself? Did anybody send me a gift card for, which I'm not expecting, but did anybody send me a gift card to go get a massage or get a pedicure to take care of myself? No. It's the realistic thing to say, or maybe like the sorry for your loss phrase that people can say, oh, I did my job to kind of protect this person, but I didn't do a thorough enough job to really see what their situation is. I didn't spend that extra 10 minutes to really understand who they are, who their culture is, what their culture is, and why it's important to them. And I think that's what's missing in some of these conversations.
Wow. Just wow. I mean, because starting with the understanding of who people are, where they are, their why, it flows everywhere into what we've been talking about today. The level of care, the shared care, the dignity of care, the cost of care. With that who and why and the value system, all of that has everything to do with the dollars and cents with a C, because you're talking about the dollars and cents with an S, because it's the sensibilities that go into, because we are talking about care. We're talking about care. If we're not having the conversation about the humanistic side, then you can never get to the dollar side of assigning a level of care that's fit for not only the caregiver, but the member receiving it. I would say when we're talking about, paying for the care, and we'll close on this because it's very important, because people have, oh my goodness, after you get past the conversation, Danielle, the sticker shock of if you're not going to talk about long-term care because it's a powder keg far as emotion, you're going to talk about it because of the dollars of it, because it is a lot of money. You said 120,000, which is around the average for, facility care, in-home care. How do we encourage people to talk more about the cost of care? Because it is so high.
I think it's just spreading an awareness. I think people think that the government is just going to save them. Medicare is the solution. Medicare only covers 100 days of skilled nursing care, so pretty much rehab. And that's if insurance actually approves. There's been some research saying that even though 100 days is acceptable under Medicare, we're more likely to not receive the full 100 days of rehab. So pretty much Medicare is not going to save you. Government's unlikely to save you for most people. So you have to find some way to care for yourself, to save. There's a really hard place in between where it's usually the affluent, wealthy people who have the extra money you can spend on long-term care. There's the really poor, low-income individuals who can have government care, even though government care and aid is not the best option. Unfortunately, the government will do whatever they can not to pay for your care. So they'll find reasons. Oh, you don't need long-term care because you don't meet all the needs to need care. They'll do whatever they can to just say, we don't want to pay. Because it's coming out of the taxpayers' money. It's the government money. They don't want to make it easy for you to have them pay for care. And then there's just like these people sandwiched right in the middle who can't afford care because it's way too expensive. They haven't prepared for it. And their income's too high. So they probably will not ever be able to get government aid because they're not in the low income, impoverished section, nor do they have enough saved to be considered maybe wealthy or affluent, depending on what your definition is. So they're kind of squashed to the middle. So you start to find some type of happy medium. If you're in a position where you can't save anymore, I would say you retire. You just kind of find that happy medium where either way, it's not going to be perfect, ideal to what I want, but I'm going to make do with what I have. And usually those scenarios get pushed onto family members. Family members
Right.
have to come and pick up the pieces because
Absolutely. Because go ahead. I'm sorry.
it just, there has to be someone to pay for care. There has to be someone to care for you. So it's either someone picking up the pieces to pay for your care or someone picking up the pieces to provide care.
Absolutely. And I love the way you broke that down, because even if you're in that sandwich part, then you have to spin yourself down in order to qualify for, Medicaid, because I share with folks often, it's care for the elderly and aid for the poor or the income challenged. So in order to qualify for, long-term care services from the government through Medicaid, you have to, because it's aiding the income challenge, you have to spin yourself down to qualify. So it's very hard to do.
Yeah, every state is different, but for both states, it's you're studying on your assets and you need to have a low income, which means that you can't be a teacher who has a pension unless you want to plan on selling your pension. Your income's not going to be lowered. And then you probably have a decent Social Security amount, which also contributes to a portion of your income amount.
Absolutely. And then also that middle, it's critical for that middle, for most folks, an average goes along, it spreads a long swath as far as, income and assets are like. Most folks need to consider transferring some of that cost through obtaining some insurance, or, if you're wealthy, self-insure all day and pay that out of pocket, or a combination. The middle folks, a combination of both. Start saving, side pocketing some money, particularly for end of life care, and joining it with some insurance. Is that a strategy that you may not see often, but recommend, or not necessarily recommend, but educate folks on?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I said, awareness.
Yeah.
Evaluate all your options and see what's best for you. For some people, there's no good, as I said, no good options. It's just the best happy medium you're going to get. So evaluate your options, see what's available to you before you make a decision.
Yeah,
it may just be kind of that sticky, happy medium that does the job, but it's not perfect.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think this is a fantastic place to wrap up. Danielle, thank you for sharing your story, your expertise, and how you educate folks and help folks through this time. What's a closing thought that you want to leave us with, and how can we find you?
So closing thought would be, I was 25 when I became a family caregiver. No one is protected from family caregiving. No one is protected from long-term care. The easier, the quicker you plan for long-term care, the better. And where to find me? I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn. Twitter, I share more of my personal story. LinkedIn is more education.
Fantastic. And I follow both. So thank you very much. Go find Danielle. If you like this conversation, you're going to love what she puts out as far as awareness and practical thoughts to consider for your journey. Danielle, thank you for coming on the show. Sure. And if you like what you've seen, heard, and feel, be sure to like and subscribe to the show. And we will chop it up next time. See you soon. Cheers. Thank you for tuning in. If you like what you heard, seen, and feel to help you achieve your wealth and well-being journey, then like, share, and subscribe to the Life Money Balance channel. And if you're ready, visit the website and schedule an appointment. And be on the lookout for the next LMB lesson. Cheers.